Let's consider now the second claim that we saw under the heading of political naturalism, the second thesis of political naturalism, namely that the city-state, the political community, is natural. We already saw, essentially, why exactly Aristotle thinks this when we were talking about the genealogy of the city-state. His reason for thinking the city-state is natural, the way he states it, is that, well, clearly the household and the village are natural, right? And he kind of hits this point intentionally, it's very clear, in his genealogy, right? The naturalness of these first communities. And well, if those first communities are natural, and if the city-state is the kind of just naturally arises from them, it's the natural fulfillment or completion of those communities, well, then the city-state's got to be natural too. That's something like Aristotle's idea. We naturally form communities and we keep kind of growing these communities naturally until we reach a community that's sufficient for us to live well. And that is the city-state, right? So it's sufficiently large such that we can have sufficient leisure time to live well and flourish, engage in virtuous rational activity, and so on. And since the city-state is the kind of fulfillment or completion or end of these other communities, namely the household and village, well, then the city-state has to be natural. Okay, fine, that's all well and good. And you might think, but that's like, I don't know, that seems a little abstract, and that doesn't, I mean, the city-state is a thing made by human beings. How could it possibly be natural? That still seems a bit odd. How could this thing be natural when it's made by human beings? And so what I want to do now is address this problem or objection that might be raised against Aristotle, right? The city-state is made by human beings. And Aristotle says as much elsewhere. I don't know that we have read it, but he's very clear that he thinks that city-states are made by human beings. Well, if it's made by human beings, isn't it artificial? And Aristotle's also very clear that no, even though it's made by human beings, it's nonetheless natural. Well, how does that work? Come on, help us out a little bit, Aristotle. Unfortunately, he doesn't really, but I'll try to help us out, I guess. And I think the way to begin to see what he's getting at, what the idea is to think of an analogy. The city-state, this is kind of Aristotle's idea. The city-state is natural in the same way that a spider's nest or a bird's nest or a beehive or a beaver's dam or whatever else you like, right? You can keep going. In the same way that those things are natural. Those things are also made, right? But nonetheless, we do want to say that there's something natural about them. They're natural. Well, in the same way that those things are natural, so too is the city-state. The city-state is like, it's a human's spider's nest, so to speak. In the same way that the spider lives in a spider's nest and uses a spider nest in order to live its life, well, so too human beings live in a city-state and use the city-state to live their lives. We can get a little bit more specific. Why think that a spider's nest, let's just take a spider's nest as our example, or spider's nest, spider's web, I suppose would be, whatever, I guess some live in nests, but why would you think that a spider's web is natural? Well, one thing that Aristotle would point out is that its function, the function of a spider's web, is the promotion of a natural end. The spider has as one of its natural ends, eating. It's got to eat. It has to eat bugs in order to live. And the spider's web helps it do that, right? It helps it eat. Eating is part of the spider's natural end. It's a thing that it's kind of naturally geared to do, and it has to do in order to live a spider life. And the spider's web helps with that. The second thing I think Aristotle would mention is that so it's not just the case that any old thing that helps promote something's natural end is going to be natural itself. But a spider's web, its existence is due to a natural impulse or capacity that a spider has to create it, right? A spider has a little gland or something, some sort of organ that shoots out the webbing, right? It's a natural impulse and capacity that the spider has to make this web. And so it's got a natural impulse to make it. It promotes the spider's natural ends. And so a spider's web is going to be natural. And we could say the same thing about a bird's nest or a beehive or whatever, a beaver's dam, whatever you like. Those things all promote the natural ends of the organisms that create them and use them. And they exist on account of some natural impulse that the organism in question has, some natural impulse or capacity that they have, right? It's part of the nature of most species of birds to make nests for their eggs, right? You go talk to a bird scientist, an ornithologist, I believe they're called, right? And you say, tell me all about birds and how they live and their nature and so on. They're at some point, they're going to tell you all about nests. Yeah. It's a natural impulse or capacity that birds have, and it promotes their natural end. In the case of a bird, right, it'd be something like reproduction and rearing of baby birds. Okay. City-state, the same two things can be said for it. Its function is the promotion of the natural end of human beings. The natural end of human beings is living well, is happiness, virtuous, rational activity. And the city-state promotes that. And moreover, the city-state's existence is due to a natural impulse to create it. It arises from these natural urges and impulses that human beings have. Right? That's what we were talking about under that first thesis of political naturalism. Human beings are political animals. So one of the things that we're going to see is we're starting to see now, and we're going to keep seeing as we move to the third thesis of political naturalism. These three theses all interact in certain ways, and they all rest upon and get at similar ideas. And so we see that occurring here, right? Human beings have a natural impulse to create city-states. Human beings are political animals. Well, that's lends some support to thinking that the city-state itself is natural.